Hello, welcome to WWOS Sports preview of the summer of cricket, the feature of which a mouth-watering 5 test match series between Australia and India. Lots to talk about on the show today. A look at the emerging players in Australian cricket. Might we see one or two young, fresh faces in the test team this summer? Is Virat Kohli's time as an international batsman coming to an end? Can our star pace trio play all 5 test matches once again this summer? And who will walk out with Usman Khawaja to open the batting for Australia in the first test? I can think of no better men to ask the above questions than Ian Chappell and Mark Taylor, who join me to have a look at what's going to be a fabulous summer of cricket. Great to see you both again.
Matt. Thanks, Matt.
I know traditionally when you were playing, the Ashes was the traditional battle. I wonder, has India-Australia gone past the magic of Australia versus England?
That's more of a public media thing, because as a player, I don't know how Mark felt, but as a player, every test match meant plenty to me, and to win it felt good, to lose it felt bloody awful. So I don't recall feeling any different. I mean, you didn't like losing to England any time, but if every test match doesn't mean something to you, well, I'm wondering what you're doing out there.
Oh, absolutely. But I think it's the Indian Australia Test Series has certainly grown in stature, but mainly because of, I think, India's growth in world cricket. There's no doubt, if you go back to even probably 10, 15 years ago, India would come to Australia and get beaten soundly. Australia would go to India and get beaten soundly. But all of a sudden things have changed. Australia started winning a few test matches in India, and now India have come here the last 2 series and actually beaten us here on our own soil, which doesn't happen very often for any side. So all of a sudden now you've got the 2 best teams in world cricket competing against each other, not just at home, but away. And I think that's been great for the game and great for this contest.
Indeed, India.
You're ignoring 69, are you?
So I'm trying to talk about maybe this century, maybe
right.
not last.
Yeah.
He had a significant birthday recently, so don't let that get...
Yeah, I didn't play in the century either, by the way.
I didn't realise you were 80. Well,
Thank you, mate. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Incidentally, India hadn't beaten Australia out here until that series in 1920 where Warner and Smith weren't available, but then they won the last 2 series here. So that just goes to demonstrate what you're saying. Australia haven't beaten them for a decade, but gee, things are looking a bit rocky from an Indian point of view. They've just lost to New Zealand at home for the first time in history. Bowled out for 46 in the first test, beaten by 8 wickets. And then Mitchell Santner got 13 wickets and bowled them out. And New Zealand winning by 113 runs. So 2-0 up in the series, the Kiwis, with 1 test still to play. There's a chance they might whitewash them. Extraordinary.
it is, and India have got some batting problems. I think Jaiswal is a very good-looking young player, left-hand opener. I think Gill can really play. But then you've got Kohli and you've got Rohit Sharma, who are both ageing, and you get to that point where people start talking about it, and maybe it starts to creep into your head a little bit. Am I getting to that age where it starts to go downhill? And they're both at that age. The only thing I'd say against that is they're coming to Australia where the pitches will be pretty good, but there'll be the extra bounce. And if they have gone over the top, then the extra bounce will find them out.
It's interesting what India have done, and Chaps is dead right. Jaiswal and Gill, to me, both look like excellent players. So they've had this injection of youth, which they had to do. You've got to rotate your batting order, and that's one of the problems Australia are having at the moment, trying to find those younger players. But they've moved on Pujara and they've moved on Rahane, and they've left Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli, their 2 best players. But all of a sudden they've had a bit of a rocky period. They're not making the runs you'd expect a senior player to make, and that has put pressure now on the younger guys and also their lower order. And they've got Rishad Pant, they've got Ashwin makes a run, Jadeja makes good runs for them down the order also. But you still need to make the bulkier runs from your best players. And over the last probably 12 or 18 months, that hasn't been the case for India.
All right, plenty to talk about in our preview. We'll get deep into that, and also we'll look at the Australian batting woes, if there are some heading into the summer. But before all of that, the Sydney Morning Herald's chief cricket writer Tom Deason has an update on all the news he's covering ahead of a big summer of international cricket.
There's a couple of storylines I'm really looking forward to this summer as we progress throughout a pretty blockbuster test series against India. I reckon Steve Smith and Marnus Labuschagne at the top of the order. Now, I know their position in the side is not under question at the moment, but if you actually look through their numbers over the last few years, they haven't been particularly great. Marnus Labuschagne 1 century in his last 39 test innings, and Steve Smith 1 test 100 in his last 25 knocks. So a few question marks. There's been a lot of chat before the summer about whether these guys are going to bat, whether Steve Smith should be opening or not, but I do think that there's a little bit of question marks around that, and I think this series will be won and lost in those sort of number 3 and 4 position. And I guess the other one as well, which gets brought about every summer, but I think the rotation of the bowlers as well. The first test is a bit of an outlier in Perth, but then there's only a 3 or 4 day break between the tests in Adelaide and Brisbane. I know all the quicks played last year together, but Josh Hazlewood said a few weeks ago that he thinks it's actually a bit of a rarity, and he's not sure that the same will happen again. So I think those reserve quicks will be very, very important. Scott Boland, we know, is an absolute superstar and can fill that void as well. Michael Neser as well has been going very well in the Shield, but also someone like a Nathan McAndrew as well, who'll be vying for a spot in the Australia A Games coming up, might be one to look out for. So I think bowling depth, and I also think that Smith and Labuschagne at the top there need to be firing if Australia to win that series. But a fascinating summer. I'll be on the road for the Herald on the Age, so follow along.
We will indeed, Tom. Of course, no Cameron Green this summer as well, which is a huge blow for Australia's chances. So a few questions for the Australian selectors to answer on the way to the break. Maybe a couple of emerging players that the selectors might want to have a look at heading into this summer.
In the field today against Victoria in a second 11 match at Manly Oval, it was hard to assess the new opening combination. However, both 20-year-olds coincidentally scored 717 runs for their clubs last season, while this year the former Australian under-19 players have notched up centuries. But a lot of doubting Thomases will say too much, too soon.
I think the state selectors have put enough trust in us they think we can do the job, so hopefully we can do the job.
We've had a fair bit of experience, so we should go all right, I think.
Mark Waugh, who is also a handy bowler, will join his twin brother Stephen in the Shield team. It's been long predicted the talented pair, who learnt their cricket in their parents' backyard at Bankstown, would sooner or later both be members of the state side.
The two young openers are also fully aware that when they walk out onto the field against Tasmania, there's going to be a real sorting out period.
And sorting out the youngsters will be this fellow, West Indian speedster now playing for Tasmania, Winston Davis.
It's a bit of a tough game first up, but still, going to play him sometime, aren't you?
So, with youthful exuberance, Mark and Mark will pad up on Friday for their biggest moment yet, and they don't do it without confidence. The message for the Apple Isle is this.
Look out, here comes two young blokes.
Ken Sutcliffe, National 9 News.
Oh, get him in. Get him in.
Was that 1985 or 1945? That was. Yeah, it was a long time ago. I reckon that was a New South Wales second 11 game.
Yeah.
And Junior and I, or Mark Waugh and I, opened the batting in that game. And he didn't get many, and I actually made 100 in that game, which got me in, because Junior was already in the New South Wales team for the first Shield game of the summer, and I had to get runs. So Junior didn't get any, but I got a couple and I needed them. So then Junior and I opened the batting for New South Wales together on debut at...
So you debut together?
Yep, the old
Wow.
the old TCA ground in October of 1985.
Would have been warm then.
It got to, I think it got to 12 at one stage, yeah.
Heat wave, mate. Heat wave.
You bumped into Winston Davis.
Yes, Winston Davis played for Tassie in that game. David Boone made 180 in that game against us. And it ended up a draw. And as Chappell is alluding to, I think we're all very glad to get off, because it didn't get too warm.
And the wind used to blow like blazes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Manly Oval, though.
Right up on the top of the hill, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
No, it was cold.
There we are. A trip back down memory lane. I don't know whether Mark Waugh or Mark Taylor are available to walk out alongside Usman at the start of this summer. But here are some contenders that the Australian selectors are looking at. Now, bear in mind that we have 2 Australia A games to come, one starting this week against India A, that's in Mackay, and the selectors have already said that Harris and Cameron Bancroft, who actually isn't on that graphic, but will be opening together for this first match, and we believe that Sam Constas, the 19-year-old from New South Wales, will get his chance to open alongside Harris in the second of those Australia A games. The other one's Nathan McSweeney, who captains Australia A in both of those games. So, can you read much into what the selectors have done? Harris to play both, Bancroft opening in the first, and then Constas the second.
They've also said that Inglis won't be considered as an opener. He is in the consideration to be in the 6, but won't be considered as opener. My feeling is it'll be, and I hope, it will get down to the 2 young guys on that graphic, either Constas or McSweeney. I'd like to see the Australian selectors bite the bullet and make it a tough call and give a young guy a go. You know what you're going to get with Harris, you know what you're going to get with Bancroft, and so far over the last 5 or 6 years it's been a few runs here and there, but nothing that's absolutely nailed their spot down. I think it's a great opportunity to try a young guy, see how he goes, and everyone says you shouldn't do that in Test match cricket, but I don't agree with that. If they're good enough, if they're your best 2 players and they're in form, give them a go. And bear in mind that Usman, who's going to open the batting with, he's also 37, 38 in December. We're going to be in a similar situation sitting in this room in a year's time.
Ahead of an Ashes series.
Ahead of an Ashes series. So now's the time to try a young guy.
Which way are you leaning?
Got a coin? I mean, the first thing is if you try and read anything in what the selectors are saying, they say nothing. They go round in circles. In fact, they work well as politicians. They don't. Everybody's got a chance. They don't say anything. I'm with you, Mark, on Constance. The only problem I would have is you're going to blood him against a very good attack. But then if you wait till the following year, you're going to blood him against another very good attack if England have got all their quickies coming here and they're all fit. So that being the case, and the fact that you really haven't got any other options, if he's in good form, you know, I'd say, yep, let him go.
The one advantage that person will have is that there's no Mohammad Shami coming this year for India, which I think is a big blow from an Indian point of view, because he's a fine bowler and he's got better every year. Now, Bumrah will also, he'll ask questions of any batsman, so he's going to be tough. Mohammad Siraj, the other quick that India have used a lot over the last 3 or 4 years, and didn't play the last test against New Zealand. So he hasn't been in the best of form. So to me, that would only add to my thoughts about trying the young guy. Yes, I think Bumrah will give them a good run, and Mohammad Siraj in form will give them a good run. But the bowling, I think, from India's point of view, might also be a little bit nervous because they're not in the form they were probably 4 years ago.
Ashwood's record in Australia is not great either.
Don't underestimate Akashdeep. He can bowl.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you've got to translate what their bowling's going to be like in Australia compared with India. I mean, Bumrah's that sort of bowler. He'll trouble you, doesn't matter where it is. But the other two, I think, in Australia, I mean, they'll miss Shami, you're right. Shami's a fine bowler. But that, as I say, that would be my only worry, that we're blooding him against, Constance I'm talking about, blooding him against a very good attack. But if you wait another 12 months, could be another very good attack. So when are you going to play?
What about a comment on McSweeney, who clearly has caught the attention of the selectors from his batting prowess, but also from a leadership perspective? He's been the Australia captain for the last couple of years now. Is there an option for him to open, or would Marnus have to go and open to allow McSweeney to bat at number 3?
Mark can probably answer this question better than me. But I think you've got to want to open to be a good opener. And I'm saying that from a personal point of view. I never wanted to open. I was forced to open a couple of times, wasn't very good at it. So to me, you've got to want to do it. That's the first thing. The second thing is Shield cricket. People are, basing a lot of their information on Shield cricket. The problem with the Shield game, compared with the one that Mark played, the one that I played, and what they're playing now, see, we couldn't avoid a fast bowler or a good spinner because you were going to play against them, and the selectors would see. And if you got runs against a good quick attack, you got runs against good spin attack, they'd say, this kid can play that sort of bowling. But now there's no international players playing, so the selectors haven't got the same basis as they had in the past. And I think if you went on Shield runs alone, you could make some big mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. We only look at someone like Marnus Labuschagne. He got picked to play for Australia, and his average for Queensland at the time was actually, I think, under 35. And now he's averaging a tick under 50, so in Test match cricket. So, as you say, the Shield stuff sometimes can be harder, sometimes can be easier. It's interesting with McSweeney and your point about opening the batting, and I think it's a valid point. You've got to want to do it. And that's the worry for me with someone like Marnus. I would not have been against Marnus moving up last year rather than Smith.
Yep.
Just moved them all up one. Marnus opens the batting and Smith bats at 3, and then you could have put Green in at 4 without any further disruption. But Marnus said he didn't want to do it. He made it very clear he didn't want to do it. So if that's still the case, and using Chappell's point, therefore it's probably not the right move at this stage to move him up now, because he's actually said he doesn't want to do it. So I think they've got to make a call and pick an opener.
I believe there's some speculation that he's actually revised his stance with the view to maybe Mick Sweeney coming in because they're good mates. But
Who's revised their stance?
Marnus, he would be maybe prepared to go to the top. But the other question I wanted to ask you, there's so much talk around Australia manufacturing opening batsmen. You open your whole career, we're talking about Mitchell Marsh and Travis Head. I mean, it's a specialist spot in Test cricket, isn't it?
It certainly was, but I think, once again, Chappell's point is valid. These days, you're not getting the upbringing that you used to have, say, in my time. In my, going back to the mid-80s, where you saw some of that footage a moment ago, you played X amount of grade games, and then you moved into the state team, and you played, I think I played something like 40 Sheffield Shield games, opening the batting for New South Wales against quality bowlers, against the Australian bowlers. And then you got a chance to play Test cricket. Now, we're almost picking our Test team, not just from Shield form, but from how a guy goes in county cricket, or how he might have gone in the recent one-day series.
T20.
T20. That was like, selectors would not look at white ball cricket as an indicator for red ball cricket. But now they have to, because there's so much fragmentation of international cricket. So it is a little bit harder to fix one. If you look at Uzi, he wasn't an opener in the early part of his career. Justin Langer wasn't an opener early on in his career. And a lot of openers like Matty Renshaw, he's actually gone down the order now. So players are moving around all over the place at the moment. So it's not easy for selectors to get a gauge on who actually wants to open the batting and who wants to be a full-time opener.
I think that's what happened in Labuschagne's case at number 3. He wanted to bat at 3. And I think the selector said, well, you want to bat there, then no one else wants to bat there. Go for your life. And I think it's a very important part of where you bat. If you want to bat somewhere, it's not a bad start, because in your head, you're ready to play in that position. If you walk out to open the batting and you're thinking, I don't want to do this job, it's not a good frame of mind.
It's a bit late. It's a bit late when you're halfway there.
Yeah.
As a cricket nerd, I've watched a lot of the Shield stuff the last couple of weeks. Steve Smith missed out in both innings against Victoria, and they are a good attack. But he did not look settled at all with his footwork. I mean, he's a champion player, and no doubt he'll bounce back. What about your observations on him leading into the summer?
Oh, there'd be a bit of nerves there. I don't think how many games you've played. You're always a bit nervous, particularly at the start of the season. Sometimes you get away and you make 100 and it settles you down. The good news from an Australian point of view, I think he made 50-odd in the one-dayer, not long after that. So he found the middle of the bat and got the feet going. But I'm sure he'd love another decent hit out before he plays against India. And I'm sure Australia would as well, because there's no doubt our batting is going to be the big talking point of the summer. If one of those openers that we talked about can nail down the spot, Smith moves back to number 4, and we see the Steve Smith of old, which I'm not sure we will, because he's not getting any younger either, then Australia are going to win. I think that's going to be an issue. But if our opening spot doesn't work, and Labuschagne and Smith have had quiet years to date, bear in mind we've only played 5 tests this year, if they don't make good runs, a bit like Sharma and Kohli for India, then we've got a game on as far as the series goes.
There's a round of Shield games starting on Friday, and New South Wales host Queensland at Cricket Central at Silverwater in Sydney. So, and I believe they'll be full-strength teams. So that's a good hit out for them.
I would make Steve Smith one of your least to worry about. Yeah, if he's at 4, don't worry about him. There's plenty of other guys to worry about.
The all-rounder position's interesting. Mitchell Marsh will have to bowl a lot more, particularly if they're to get the 3 main fast bowlers through 5 tests back-to-back. Can you see that happening again?
Well, if I'm in the opposition, the first guy I'm going to... I mean, I hate the word targeting because I don't think you should do it. But I'm going to make Nathan Lyon yeah, I'm going to make him work really hard. If you can get Nathan Lyon out of the attack, then you've got to bring the quicks back before you want to. You've got to work them harder. To me, he's the bloke. If you allow Nathan Lyon to bowl the way he wants to, you allow him to bowl well, then the Australian captain's going to be the happiest man on the field. So to me, that I mean, there's a lot of rubbish spoken about all-rounders. I mean, how many overs are they going to bowl? If your bowlers are bowling well, they're not going to get too many overs, or shouldn't get too many overs. And, you know, the three quicks, they are very, very good. Nathan Lyon has been very, very good. Nathan Lyon's the guy, if I'm in the opposition, Nathan Lyon's the guy I want to bring down. And I can tell you from a captaincy point of view, if you got to change the bowling before you really want to and bring somebody back who's not ready to come back, that's about the worst thing can happen to you as a captain, as far as bowling changes are concerned.
It's a congested schedule again too.
Yeah.
5 tests in quick succession.
And that's where your point about the all-rounder is valid, is that it is nice to have someone, if back-to-back test matches, your bowlers have bowled day 4 and they've had to work hard to bowl a side out, or worst case scenario, you didn't get a result your own way, and then you're bowling first the very next test match, and you might get a test match where you're bowling first on a green deck, and you want to make sure your bowlers are fresh. That's where it's nice to have that extra option. But Australia are lucky in that the three quicks we've got are 3 fine bowlers, and they're also strong bowlers, and they've got better, not worse, in recent times. So they'll be solid enough, but they're all ageing. I suppose that's the other issue. We've got great backup, no doubt, but I no doubt that Hazelwood, Stark, Cummins, they'll be sitting back at the moment thinking, we're in for the 5 test matches. We want to play 5 test matches because A, we like playing for Australia, and B, I don't want to give Scotty Boland an opportunity, or Michael Nessa, because they mightn't get it back.
And one of them's captain, of course.
And do you think that Labuschagne bowling medium pace might have something to do with the all-rounder question? No, it's a serious point I'm making.
Well, it may be, and they've also got Travis Head to bowl a few offies, which he might well do.
And, you know, I mean, Smith he could bowl a bit. So there's plenty of spinners, but mediums are what they're worried about, and maybe that's why Labuschagne is bowling a few of them.
Maybe because he's captain and he can bowl himself whenever he wants.
And also, he's a batter.
He loves it.
He's a batter who bowls a bit. And you saw that footage early on of Mark Waugh. Well, Mark Waugh and Steve Waugh, when they were young, both all-rounders, but both batting all-rounders, but they loved a bouncer.
Yeah.
And didn't Marnus love a bouncer when he got a chance to bowl the other day? Because you get enough of them when you bat. There's an opportunity just to give a few back.
Yes.
And Mark was the worst.
Let's talk about Pakistan, who, well, just a remarkable series against England. They're coming out here for 3 one-dayers and 3 T20s. Have you seen anything more Pakistan than what's happened there? They lose the first test and concede 7 for 823. They sack the selection panel. Then they back up and play the next test on the exact same pitch, which they've had industrial blowers and everything, haven't watered it to dry it out, and they come back and win the next 2 test matches. It's the most Pakistan thing I've ever seen. I only dropped Babar Azam and Shaheen Afridi and all these guys. It's just unbelievable.
Sack their one-day coach.
Sack the coach.
Gary Kirsten, who hasn't, I don't think he's even done a game. He signs up in April and then he resigns in October, a week before they come into Australia. But that's, unfortunately, Pakistan cricket.
But they thrive when there's drama.
Exactly right. And we all know they've got some very good cricketers, really good talented cricketers. But they play in a very confused way at times. When they get it right, look out.
Couple of things. I remember many, many years ago commentating with Harsha Bhogle, Indian, sure, but I think India, Pakistan, probably a bit similar in this regard. And it was when the bun fight was going on at the SCG, and then they were going to Perth. And India beat Australia in Perth, which is basically unheard of. But I remember Harsha saying to me, because there was all sorts of chaos over the Sydney Test, you know, there was Monkey Gate, all that sort of stuff went on. And Harsha said to me, "You Australians are stupid." I said, "What are you talking about, Harsh?" He said, "Indians thrive in chaos." He said, "You love things to be organised And he said, we thrive in chaos. And I think that would apply to Pakistan as well. That's the first thing. Second thing, have I ever seen spin bowling played worse than what England did? Probably never. Although India went close when they played against New Zealand. But Pakistan, I mean, OK, their spin bowlers, they're all right. And you're playing on a wicket that's been played on, you know, many days before. But you put that out of your mind. You're playing spin bowling. You just play it. And England were hopeless. And if you listen to some of their commentators, you understand why England are very bad players of spin bowling. And the next question I would love to ask is some dopey coach, I'd love to ask him who decided that the reverse sweep was safer than using your feet well. Because it's totally illogical. And when I hear an England commentator saying, oh, the sweep's the way out when the track's spinning, what I should do is go bang and hit the mute button and just shut them up.
Well, hopefully people watching us aren't doing that exact same thing. But incredible performance by Pakistan to bounce back. Those two spinners we saw at the start of those images, Norman and Sajid, opened the bowling in the first innings of the third test and bowled the whole first session. I've never seen. I don't think I've never seen that. Maybe the Indian teams that were spin heavy back in your era of playing, but remarkable.
Mark thinks that was in the dark ages. It was only 60.
Before television, wasn't it?
Maybe colour television.
They had television in Australia, not in India. I don't think. But in '69, Russi Surti, who was in the side, again, batting all-rounder, but he could bowl medium pace, he would probably open and he'd bowl one over, and I reckon the second over probably bowled by a spinner at the other end. And they used to throw the ball in the dirt and, you know, all that, which you didn't mind as a player. I mean, if you could play, you could play, you know. And I always felt that we had a real chance to win that series because I thought we can all play spin bowling and we'll make 300 pretty well under any conditions. And with our attack, if we've got 300, we'll win a lot more than we lose, which we did.
It's interesting looking at that series, the Pakistan-England series. I thought Pakistan were going to make exactly the same mistake as they did, was it 3 years ago, when Bazball started. Bazball started with that series, that coinciding series of 3 years ago. When England went there, Pakistan put an absolute roads, hard, flat, no grass, no spin, and England just teed off, scored it 5, 6 and over, made huge totals and scored quick enough to force Pakistan to bat late in games when they were holding on for a draw, and they lost all three of them. And since then, if you look at what's happened with Bazball, England have always done, it's been the best for them when the tracks are flat.
Yeah.
When the track has had a bit in it, whether I'm talking about whether seam or bounce or spin, Bazball has been nowhere near as effective. And I think that's what you've seen. I see Pakistan first test match, put out another road. England made, 7 for 820? And then all of a sudden they've put out a couple of slow ones and they've won 2 test matches. So be interested to see what the tracks are like in Australia this time next year.
Green.
And Bazball is the greatest load of codswallop ever spoken, which Brendan McCullum, who it was named after, has said. And the reason why it is rubbish, and you'll understand this as a captain, what Stokes is doing is what England should have been doing for crikey knows how many years before. They're trying to win the game from ball number 1. And what he's doing, sure, you've got to bat aggressively because that gives your bowlers more time to get the 20 wickets, which you'll tell me and I can tell you, getting 20 wickets is the hardest thing you're ever going to do on a test field. So the longer you can give your bowlers, the better. But you've got to try and win the game as a captain from ball number 1. And that's what Stokes is doing. And for some reason or other, he stopped doing that a bit in Pakistan. And when you see a captain giving easy singles to batsmen, I mean, I watch that and it drives me absolutely crazy. And now, I don't know whether Stokes has got a bit tired as a captain or what, but he needs to get back to the old Ben Stokes, who was a damn good captain, and try and win the game from ball number 1, which means, you know, you're trying to win it in the field as well as with the bat.
Michael Vaughan wants him to go and bat at number 3 now, I noticed.
Number 3.
Well, we're talking about India having some problems. England have got a major problem.
Oh, we'll save that for next summer. If Glenn McGrath was here, he'd say 5-0 Australia.
Ooh.
What do you think?
I think it's going to be a tight series, I really do, and we've seen that the last 2 series here. I think Australia have the advantage, although they've got those batting concerns that we talked about. So I think Australia will win the series. I always say that, Australian sides here, but I think it's going to be tight. I'll go 3-1 Australia. We'll get some rain somewhere.
Okay.
I'd go 3-2 if every match is played out.
Well,
3-2 to Australia.
Gee, a deciding game in Sydney would be good.
That'd be nice.
Would, yeah.
As long as it doesn't rain for 5 days.
That might be the washout.
Like it invariably does. Great to see you both, and enjoy the summer. Always good to catch up.
Thank you.
Mark Taylor and Ian Chappell previewing the summer of cricket, and great to be with you, and we'll be back throughout the summer to talk more.